Hi, this is Mark. I wanted, for this video, I'm going to give an animated representation of borderline personality disorder. So if we start, so borderline personality disorder. So generally, if we go on like a timeline, so this is like, there's some range. Let's just, usually we can define like, let's say adulthood, or this is like age. So this is by age. Roughly, we could speak in around like 18 or so, and then we have adolescence usually starting. We're just gonna say 13. So basically, this is like adolescence. If I can spell that right. And then this is like 0, and basically, I think it's like 0 to like this is a growth phase. So there's a growth phase right here, or we could call this growth phase. And adolescence is also growth phase, and then we have childhood. So from here to here is like uh, childhood, and and then we have adulthood. Well, somewhat. It should be, usually it's beyond 25, but for this case, we'll just consider identity. The identity is relatively formed at about 18. Um, but generally, what ends up happening is through, I think it's like usually like, I think it's ages, I think it's usually 2 to 5 equals rapid growth spurt. So brain development. So generally, like if we go with like age range, um, growth, like if we quantify it, there's going to be a flux. Usually, I think it's early on, like in the when we're in the fetus, and then usually around like 2 to 5, there's somewhere 0 to 5, somewhere in that range. There's a massive growth rate, so um, it's going to be. So if this is age, so it's if we start 0, what's this considered? I think 0 would make more sense because you're a baby and your brain's developing rapidly, and then it kind of dwindles in like early childhood, and then it picks up again in adolescence. So if we cut off around, we're consider 5. It's not going to always be 5, but 13, for instance, and usually the next cutoff is about 18. Puberty can always be different for everyone, but usually there's like a range, and then it kind of modulates or um, stagnates a little bit. And we can just say this is cumulative growth, so it kind of like stagnates a little bit. Maybe some slight progression because it's always going to be some progression. We're growing, and then puberty ticks off, and it really picks up, and then towards the end it kind of flattens, and then of course it's still going to go in positive direction, but so forth. But the key focus is like within this range, and then again in this range. And the reason for this is because if brain develops very rapidly, what that does is it's modulating. It's really having an effect on the identity. So our identity is constructed via feedback. So ideally, we want positive feedback. So positive feedback is equals constructive or growth, and then negative feedback equals destructive decay. And this is these cases right here are provided within growth phase. It's very detrimental within growth phase. So these are the critical phases. And when you receive too much negative feedback within the growth phase, it reinforces these personality disorders. So abuse. So we know that abuse or neglect are key triggers for BPD. And this is a spectrum. This is a spectrum disorder. So think of like a spectrum. So it's like BPD spectrum. There's ranges of severity. We can think of like this as a limit, where if you exist anywhere over here, you're diagnosed with BPD. So this is a BPD range. So the BPD range is over here, and then right here is we can consider, this is kind of like getting close, but we don't really know. Like this would be relatively low or good stability. So this has to do more with stability. BPD is a stability. So BPD equates to low stability with respect to identity. So generally, what ends up happening is I like to think of it like if we go into like consider like I always bring up this example. So if you consider a diamond, so this is like a diamond. So the key characteristics are very hard, few planes of weakness. So this is a key. What BPD has to do with is more of their identity doesn't form as a shell. There's something called a shell. So like if you draw a stick figure, if this is like an analogy. And then, so this is like BPD case. It just, because it's reinforced through the destruction, through negative feedback that is continually reinforced, it weakens the identity. So therefore, when you're bombarded with external, it's very weak. It's hard for them. It creates a nervous system reaction. So with BPD, so this is a nervous system, and they can't control this. This is a key. So this is, think about like external, how would I put this? Negative external input. So as a negative external input increases, and generally we can kind of, someone with BPD may misperceive things, but we're just going to consider like negative external input. The nervous system reaction in a normal case, let's just say normal case, so there's no, we're going to go like, it's going to go up. But in BPD case, so this is like normal. This isn't going to be the case. This is just a representation. Like this function is not, it's just a, we can't quantify stuff like this, but this is just showing that the rate of change is much faster. There's a much stronger nervous system with lower external influence, which makes sense. See the difference is that someone who's normal will receive a relatively low external or nervous system. Someone with BPD though has a higher, and the difference, the deviation, is what creates the nervous system reaction. creates anxiety and or irritability. These two are extremely connected. Anxiety and irritability um, tend to work in tandem. And especially it's linked to the nervous system reaction. The interesting thing is, what this does is it creates energy shifts. Um, so basically, so if there's like how would I put this? Nervous system reaction, it's going to um, offset the balance in the body, essentially. So mental health, I would just say mental health and nervous system reaction, and this is in a negative direction. Negative direction. This is mental health right here. It says nervous system reaction increases, mental health should decay. And this is just showing as nervous system becomes more negative, it's creating more lower mental, and it's depreciating more for someone with BPD, and that is a problem. So someone with BPD needs to reinforce what was taken away, what wasn't formulated, which is the outer hard shell, like a diamond, and try to limit the planes of weakness over time. So someone BBT or BPD, someone with BPD needs more positive reinforcement to compensate. This is naturally. It's like ADHD. You don't have enough dopamine or receptivity to dopamine, so you need to focus on heavy interest to compensate for the lack of reward. So just like the ADHD case, this is analogous to ADHD. Let's just say reward response. Response. So let's just say this is a typical. This is like a typical response. Well, someone with ADHD. So this is like ADHD. This is typical. So because it's lower, to normalize it, so let's just say now here's an interest, or here's a strong interest is someone with ADHD. This is just like a menial task. But someone who's normal gets a typical response. Someone with ADHD has to focus on a heavy interest to yield the same response. So similarly, BPD, we're going to consider validation. So a typical degree of, kind of drew it kind of too high. Typical degree, so someone with BPD is inhibited. So they have an inhibited response. This is just a typical, this right here is a case for like a, just a typical normal response for like feedback. So someone with BPD, basically, to compensate, they need so basically they're going to need how would I put this, they need to overcompensate by going into an environment that feeds the validation at a much higher frequency. So the frequency, so this is a case, or frequency of validation is higher. So this is like a normal frequency right here, and then the frequency is higher, meaning they need to receive it at a much higher frequency to yield a typical typical response. But this is something that's outside the bounds of control due to the nervous system is like kind of creating this push pull reaction, and it's kind of when there's multiple triggers that set off the reaction, it's kind of outside, very hard to resist the mood swing. Um, so someone BPD to modulate this, they need to get into an environment that um, is favorable. You don't want to go to a bar or somewhere where it's going to cause more triggers. So key is minimizing. So the key to recovery. So minimize trigger per per area, or in this case, it's actually volume triggers. So like example, find domain or niche where you where you can socialize with like-minded people. The world is chaotic, so you never know who you run into. So it's good to find a good niche. You find like-minded people, and that minimizes the reaction by minimizing trigger. So minimize trigger, minimizing triggers equals minimized reaction, because the reactions themselves are what kind of reinforce or make the recovery prolonged, and it basically creates more havoc, and it depreciates health, mental health, and it can amplify the need for validation over time. So it's very important to find a niche to recover. And then another case, I think it's very important to read, or reading is very important. It's a good way to feed mind positive energy. Of course, exercise is good. Mind plus body connection. When the body is healthy, the mind is going to be more healthy. There's a positive feedback loop there. So and there's many ways. It's really just trying to, the validation is going to come by feeding the mind the positive energy, and reading and finding ways to cope or manage, and basically build the awareness, because the nervous system reactions happen so fast. So clearly being in the wrong environment is going to only feed that, and in the negative direction. So it's going to cause the continuous back and forth energy shifts that kind of creates makes everything worse, and then it creates more disequilibrium, imbalance, and so forth. So this was just my synopsis over BPD. It's a complicated disorder. I am not an expert in this area. This is just how my perspective on the matter. Hope you enjoyed, and I will see you next time.